Hello, everyone. I am going to be sharing this to YouTube as well as Facebook. This is going to be a overview of some definitions with Niddah and how to ask shilas or ask questions when things come up. So just give me a moment to share this so people can join in if they wish. So I am using the book, A Women's Guide to the Laws of Niddah, Rabbi Benjamin Forst, Forst. This is an ArtScroll publication. I'll hold it up here so you can see. So you can go to artscroll.com and purchase that, or typically any Judaica store will have this work or something similar. So I've really enjoyed this book. This takes all the very complicated halacha and makes it really condensed down. And so we're just going to start at the beginning and kind of slowly go through it week by week. When I feel like I've week by week, and I will just see how far I can get this evening. I don't want to make it too long because no one wants to sit for hours, so I'm just going to start at the beginning. There is a little bit I'm not covering in here in terms of the preface and things like that, but that really gives the that's why you need to purchase the book. So I'm just going to go right into book one. So we're going to start with chapter one, the basics of Hilchos Niddah. So this chapter is a short overview of the fundamentals of halachos of Niddah, and they will be elaborated on in later chapters. So as I do videos, I'll name the chapters based upon what chapter that will be covering. I'm also keeping an eye out for anyone who might leave comments or whatever. So and you can also join join the Zoom. I posted a link in a couple of different groups, and if next time you want to join, you let me know and I'll send you the Zoom link so you can actively participate. So obviously the first thing is, what is Niddah? It's one of the three most important categories of halacha in terms of Jewish life. Most Jews are married, so Niddah has to deal with family purity laws. Then you have the issue of food, which is kosher, which I've done a few classes on keeping kosher. And then there is Shabbat. So those are Shabbos. So those are the three pillars in terms of, if you're calling yourself an observant Jew, those are what you that's what is understood as, when someone says they're an Orthodox Jew, they're going to have those three fundamentals. Okay, so Niddah is a woman who has a discharge of uterine blood. So that's an important distinction between that and others, which we'll get into a little later. Divine wisdom has ordained that she become tamei, and bia with her husband is prohibited. She remains in Niddah even after cessation of the flow until she undergoes a specific purification process, which we'll get into. The culmination of this process coincides with a time when she is close to ovulation and thus most fertile. And this brings up an interesting point. So it is typical that the whole Niddah experience for a woman typically lasts 11 to 12 days in a typical situation, and most women will ovulate between around day 14, because the cycle will last anywhere between 28 to 32 days. And so interestingly enough, you have those who struggle having children and then start observing the family purity laws, often find that they're blessed with a child because it just so happens to line up there. That's not always the case. Sometimes you actually have a more serious problem where a woman ovulates super early. So like during the time where BIA is not permitted. So that can be a halakha problem. So often they'll get on, they'll have medication and other treatments to try to change her cycle to align more. And there also is, if you've had a child recently and or within 24 months and your cycles have started back, you are permitted to use certain types of family planning or birth control. So it's not, the goal is not to give birth to as many babies as possible necessarily, because there's parameters depending on the community that you're in. You have that 24-month break between children that you're allowed to have, and actually encouraged to use some form of birth control, typically hormonal or rhythm method, and that kind of thing, whatever works for the woman depending on what her situation is. So for example, you're supposed to have via the night of you go to the mikvah, but obviously if you don't want to have a baby, some women will use, if you're not on a hormonal medication, you are permitted to use a woman is permitted by most halakhic authorities to use something like a diaphragm, and that kind of thing. And there's other, discussions of that. Actually, there's an interesting book, if you want to get into the nitty gritty of that particular topic of birth control and BIA and that kind of thing. There's halakhic positions, which I'll have to get the name of the rabbi who wrote that, who delved for, who is it?
Yaakov Shapiro.
Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro wrote that, and it's very technical. It's not, it has to be something that you really want to get into the sources with. But anyway, so I'll continue. So the uterus is the organ at the center of the procreative process. Its function is to provide the embryo with a proper environment to develop into a fetus until it's sufficiently developed to be born. This, in a sense, the uterus is the source of human life. Hence, it is called makor, source, or mother. It is also the core of the Niddah process. So you have every month, if an egg is not fertilized, she's not pregnant, you're in a certain sense losing that month, you've lost that opportunity. So it brings a woman separates from her husband, and it makes her tameh ritually. And it's actually called this in regards to the discharge renders a woman niddah. And in this sense, the uterine flow is associated with death, since the anticipated life was not actualized. Hence, the uterus is called kever, grave. Thus, the menstrual cycle is a cycle of life and death, hope and disappointment. So the main prohibition of bia with a niddah is among the 36 cardinal prohibitions punishable by keros when committed willingly. In addition, the prohibition of niddah extends to any personal physical contact between a niddah and any man, whether her husband or a stranger. So you have a lot of in an observant Orthodox community, men and women don't touch because of this particular issue. And obviously, you're not going to embarrass a woman. You're not going to ask her. So everyone is shomer negia. And you're not going to see a man shake another man's wife's hand or anything like that. It's just kind of understood in that someone coming into a community with that kind of culture, coming like from the South where I come, the Southern United States, where everyone hugs each other, it can be quite a jarring, thing when you come into the Orthodox Jewish community, and there's that standard. And if you're not aware of it, it can create some awkward situations. So just so that you're aware, that's pretty that's observed in any Orthodox community, and it's not something that's meant to be disrespectful. It's actually to protect both men and women. And you also have other laws of Yehud as well, which means that a man and a woman can't be alone together under most circumstances, obviously if they're not married and that kind of thing. So that's a whole other class in itself. But I just wanted to mention that. So any woman married or single above the age of 12 is assumed to be a Niddah and is subject to all the prohibitions of Niddah. So when a girl goes into puberty and starts having her cycles and that kind of thing, she's assumed to be Niddah, and she doesn't go to mikvah because she's not married. So only married women go to the mikvah, because the main reason the woman has to go to the mikvah is to be with her husband. So a single woman really doesn't have a need for that if she's not married. And since there's the laws of Shomer Negia, there's not really a reason to go to mikvah as a single woman. So in addition to the prohibition of Negia, a married couple is subject to the laws of Hakaras. These are the laws which govern the conduct of a couple while the wife is in Niddah. These laws prohibit acts which may lead to physical intimacy between a husband and wife. They govern the way they sleep, eat, and even travel together. Even a woman who is unsure of her status, i.e., she found a questionable stain or badika cloth, or she has a question about the validity of her tevila, that's the mikvah, must follow all the rules of hakaras until she is tahara status is clarified. These laws are discussed in chapter 6. So again, we're going to go over that. So here are just a few definitions that we're going to go over for the basic the basic understanding. Okay, so number one, this is how a woman becomes Niddah. So number one, the most obvious, she has a blood flow. A woman becomes a Niddah with the onset of a uterine discharge of blood. Niddah begins the moment even a minute amount of blood flow from the uterus into the vagina, even if it is subsequently does not leave her body. Any appearance of menstrual blood at any time renders a woman Niddah, whether the blood is part of her normal menstrual cycle, mid-cycle bleeding caused by hormonal treatments, or any unusual and unexpected blood flow. Even a woman who has a set pattern, vet kava, for her period and sees blood at another unusual time is a Niddah. A woman in mid-pregnancy, during nursing, or post-menses who experiences a uterine blood flow, finds blood on a badika cloth, or finds a kesem, becomes a Niddah. So basically it's uterine blood specifically, not just blood so it has to be from that specific place. A kesem, under rabbinic law, a woman becomes a Niddah even if she merely finds a blood stain, a kesem, on her garment. A kesem renders her Niddah under the following conditions. A, the stain must be the size of a U.S. penny. B, the stain must be on a white, not colored object. C, the object upon which the stain is found must be susceptible to tuma. D, the stain cannot reasonably be attributed to another source. And E, the stain is not found where menstrual blood may have been discharged. These and related halachas are discussed in chapter 4. So just an overview there. So, a woman who is not who's not on her having a cycle and she's clean at that point, should wear colored garments, just so there's not issues with stains in case there's some mid-cycle, especially after having children. And sometimes the months afterward you still have your cycles. So I had a baby 9 months ago, and it's took nine months to get kind of back to normal schedule, I guess, because I'm nursing and that kind of thing. And so knowing, okay, don't wear white undergarments so I don't become a Niddah so easily is very helpful. So a badika, a woman who does an internal examination with a badika cloth and finds dam on the cloth, that's blood, becomes a Niddah. A stain on a badika cloth differs from a kesem that it renders a woman Niddah, regardless of its size or color of the cloth. And I think I showed these in the first class I did a few weeks ago. They're just a small cotton thin cloth that you use for internal examination. Which we'll get into later, but that does automatically render you Niddah if there's blood found using one of those. So typically it's encouraged for women not to use badika unless they're in the process of getting clean. A hargasha, this is definition number 4. A woman who feels the sensation of a vaginal flow is a hargasha, must suspect that some blood flowed from her body. She may be required to do a badika. These halachas will be discussed in chapter 3. So if you have a sensation of some kind that you need to, there are halakas in regards to when you need to check. Dam basulim, hymenal blood is not dam niddah. It is caused by a wound and not associated in any way with menstrual bleeding. Nevertheless, Chazal decided that dam basulim renders a woman niddah. This will be discussed in chapter 26. So that's in regards to a virgin who's married and they have bia, and the laws actually apply whether the woman bleeds or doesn't bleed after the first bia with her husband. So that's a whole interesting set of halachas as well, and also a reason why when we get to that a ways from now, it does make sense that typically, or in Orthodox Jewish communities, they don't go somewhere on a honeymoon for a week. They stay in the community and they do. It's just really, really different, especially in regards to the lives of these halachas. It makes a lot of sense. So, okay. Number 6, Yoletus, a woman who gives birth. Yoletus becomes tamei as a niddah, regardless of whether the child is alive or stillborn, and regardless of whether she or not she bled as a result of the childbirth. After giving birth to 4 kids, there's a lot of blood. If the child is male, she may count 7 clean days and then immerse herself in a mikveh. If the child is female, she counts 7 clean days, but cannot toivel until 14 days have passed since the birth. However, she does not need 14 clean days. Right, so a girl can give, a girl has the capability of also having a child later on, obviously. So it's doubled that's why it's doubled for a girl. And actually this is what happened to me with my 3rd. I actually was able to go to mikveh, and within the first, I think it's 88. 88 days for a girl. I think it's only 66 for a boy. But if you have any kind of like spotting or anything like that, that's one of the only times when uterine blood does not make you a niddah. It's actually pure blood, which because it's within that certain time frame. That's where it calls it in the Torah. It says it's the days of, I think it literally says the days of pure blood there. So that's very unique to the postpartum period. And after those days, then if you have any abnormal or spotting, and then that would actually make you a niddah. So there's that really interesting span of time there that's unique after giving birth. If a woman has a miscarriage, she's consult a Rav regarding her status. A woman who gives birth through a cesarean section is not included in the halachas which pertain to Yoletus. However, she may become a niddah due to vaginal bleeding. So I've had both C-section and regular birth. You definitely bleed with both. So and also there's absolutely no way that you can, usually you're bleeding for weeks. So it's not, never heard of a woman who stopped bleeding within 2 weeks and could go to the mikveh, and it's just not healthy either. So God made it so that it's at least 6 weeks before you can safely do any of that. So I think I heard of one woman who was able to go at went to mikveh 4 weeks, I think. So, but that's an unusual case. So generally speaking, it's like 6 weeks or more. And also you're healing too. So there's a lot of, if you've had like a vaginal delivery. So, all right, opening of the uterus. A woman becomes a niddah even before she actually gives birth. A woman may acquire a niddah status even without any visible appearance of dam. Whenever the uterus opens sufficiently, one must assume that dam is discharged and thereby running a woman niddah in the process of contractions prior to childbirth. The uterus opens to a degree that it renders her niddah even if no bleeding occurs. So there's a whole range of discussion on that point of when a woman becomes a niddah during childbirth, and that's a whole. It will cover that more in chapter 22. It says. Through her own admission. So this is one that married woman needs to be careful of. The woman may acquire the status of niddah merely by stating that she's a niddah. Thus, a woman who tells her husband that she's niddah becomes a niddah by virtue of her statement, whether it is true or not. Any subsequent claim that her statement was not serious but was actually said in jest has no validity. She requires a 5-day waiting period. a Hafiz Tahara, Shivat Nakiyam, and a Tevila. The subject of a woman becoming a Niddah should never be used in jest. The halachas will be discussed in chapter 5. So that just shows the gravity of the just joking around about Niddah. It's not something to joke around about. It has very serious halachas and implications. Obviously, it can be very stressful for the couple if you're just joking around, like, oh, I'm just kidding, and like, I think they say you have like 3 seconds to take it back or something like that. So, but it's not. Okay. So it's not something to joke around with, because it's one of the 3 pillars of, observance, and it's the ebb and flow of marriage, and interestingly enough, with our 4 children, we haven't done it a lot. So it makes it a little bit more challenging, because when you're pregnant for 9 months, and then 4 times, and we haven't had a lot of practice. So when you have to practice it, it does take a lot of discipline. But the point is, it's nothing to joke around about. And so women should take it very seriously, because the man is relying upon the woman to be honest and open and communicating, because without her, he can't really follow these halachas and that kind of thing. And also on his part, to be careful not to cause any embarrassment to her in various situations, whether you're traveling or at home or you're guests or whatever. You just both parties need to be aware of how to handle the situation. All right, moving on. What type of blood makes for Niddah? The cause of the bleeding in a uterine blood, which we covered before. This includes uterine bleeding caused by hormonal treatment, a medical examination, and so forth. So this is really important when you're considering, any kind of birth control, that there are a lot of forms of birth control that cause, bleeding more often, which like a UTI will cause bleeding more. When you're first getting on hormonal medication, can cause bleeding on and off. So you just have to be aware of those things when you're trying to figure that out. And of course, a Rav should be, if you have a halakhic authority to go to discuss those things, they can guide you with that. And there's also nowadays, there's a lot of resources online. I'll post when I edit the description, I'll put a link to a specific one that has a hotline that you can call anonymously and that kind of thing. And there's a lot of resources out there for, there's Orthodox Jewish women who you can speak with and that kind of thing for suggestions depending on your circumstances. So the type of blood, uterine blood causes Niddah regardless of whether it was liquid or dry. A woman who finds a substance of questionable color or on a bead cloth or on a garment must show the specimen to a Rav to determine whether it is actually dried blood or something else. So we'll get into to that at a later point in regards to when you show it to a Rav. So the color of the blood, any shade of red or black found on an examination cloth or a garment. Stain on a garment requires specific size, renders a woman Niddah. Pure yellow, blue, or green shades do not. Certain shades of brown may be considered Niddah, whether found on an examination cloth or a garment, and should be shown to a Rav. Newlyweds should show any color, including yellow, to a Rav until they learn how to properly identify shades with certainty. So there's definitely a lot there to be said, and we'll get into the more specifics later. So bleeding which does not render her Niddah. A woman who bleeds from a vaginal or cervical wound or abrasion caused by a medical examination or from any other case is not necessarily a Niddah. Whenever a physician performs a gynecological examination, even if no bleeding occurs, a Rav must be consulted. Often a physician will reassure his patient that the blood found afterward is not uterine blood and therefore not a problem. This may be not necessarily so. A woman should never rely upon the physician alone to decide whether she is a Niddah. Obviously, unless, if it's a situation where you're going to go to a doctor and they're not a religious Jew, they're not going to know the specific laws. It is possible that a woman may find blood on a badika cloth, a garment, or may even notice blood leaving her body yet not become niddah, if the blood is attributable to a source other than the uterus. Halacha may at times assume that it is not dam niddah. And so this is one of the areas where you're really trying to find leniencies. So a lot of times in halachas, you're trying to be more stringent, but in terms of niddah, because husband and wife shouldn't be separated longer than necessary, there is leniencies are, they try to find as many leniencies as possible. All right, so badika. So I think I covered this a little bit. Several times during her menstrual cycle, a woman is required to do a badika. This is especially important when trying to do these 7, trying to get to be Torah again. A badika is an internal examination done with a cloth which is inserted into the vagina. The purpose of all badikas is to determine whether any uterine blood is found. A badika is normally required at 2 critical junctures at a woman's monthly cycle. On the day or expected period to prove that her menstruation has not begun, and B, when she wishes to begin her purification process, she is required to do a series of badikas to ensure that her menstruation is completely ended. The manner in which badika is done is explained in chapter 7. In addition, a chaz and a kala are required to do a series of badikas before and after bia, shortly after the wedding. These badikas are explained in chapter 26. Badika should not be confused with kasamim. The blood stain on a badika cloth is treated with all the severity of a blood flow. It renders a niddah regardless of the size of the stain or color of the cloth. So we'll go into much more detail, but basically, in those situations, you have an established pattern, so you do a badika. And in certain situations, if you have like issues with bleeding after bia and that kind of thing like that, you may need to do badikas and that kind of thing. So that's why a Rav is important to consult. So, and then there are certain times when you're trying to get tahora or pure to be able to go mikveh, that you need to do the badikas. And so these all can be, and from my own experience, it can be difficult to remember all of them. And so there are apps. I use mikveh calendar. It's just a few dollars a year. And it will remind you every day, okay, you need to do this, or this is when you should do this. And your expected period might be coming, or this is when you'll be able to go to mikveh. And so you input the information into the app. So if you're wanting something like that, it is available. It's incredibly helpful to get a text message and go, remember to check before sundown, because it'll give you the times and that kind of thing, because there's a lot of halakha to remember, and when you're a mom of children, it can be difficult, or just life in general. So the tahora process. So this is just a quick overview, and then we'll be done for tonight. The woman who comes in niddah, even if only through a mere speck of dam, either as a flow or a badika cloth, or through a kesem, which is judged to be tamei, cannot purify herself from tuma without a tahora process inclusive of a waiting period of at least 5 days from the time she originally became niddah, followed by B, a thorough badika called a hefsek tahora, C, counting a series of 7 clean days called Shevet Nikim, D, thorough bathing, hair washing, and combing called Hafifa, and finally Tevila, immersing in a kosher mikveh. These requirements must be performed in the order stated above, otherwise she remains a niddah. Even each of these requirements is explained in chapter 9 through 16. So those are several different chapters which we'll go over. Vestos. The term vest pertains to the pattern by which a woman menstruates. Chazal assigned an average vet called a ola binos to a woman who has no established pattern. Why is it so important to calculate the day of the vet? The Yom HaVest is the day during which she expected menstruation to begin. A couple that has not calculated the next expected period could easily transgress the prohibition of niddah. This could occur in two ways. A menstrual flow could begin during BIA, or B, a flow could begin anytime during the day with barely noticeable discharge, which might be overlooked. By calculating the next exhibition period, the couple can take preventative measures so that they do not transgress the laws of Niddah. These steps are: the couple must abstain from BIA during the time the period is anticipated. A Badika must be performed on the day of the vet so that any minute blood flow may be detected. If a woman with a vet kava does not do a Badika, BIA may not be resumed until a Badika is done. In order to avoid Vestos problems, a vet calculator must be maintained. Setting up a calendar is explained in chapter 18. So, and also it's discussed there, I believe, that if you've given birth in 24 months, you can't actually, it's difficult to establish one, though you should try. So I'm going to stop there, and we'll talk about Shilas and how to ask them next time, and just continue on. I just don't want these to be too long so people are not able to sit in one sitting. So if you have any questions, please comment, and hope I will plan to do this next week, either on Tuesday or Wednesday. I'll post when I'm going to do the next class.